Deep within the abandoned copper mine, the couple had set up camp, their only source of light, the crackling campfire. The mine's long-forgotten tunnels stretched endlessly into the dark, their walls damp and oppressive. They had come seeking adventure, but the further they ventured, the more the air turned thick with unease. The girl awoke suddenly in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, a faint clanking of chains echoing through the darkness. Her eyes darted around, the flickering fire casting eerie shadows against the jagged rock walls. She shivered, feeling an unnatural cold creep over her skin. She looked down and froze on her forearm, a dark purple bruise in the unmistakable shape of a hand. Panic surged through her as she jolted upright, shaking the man beside her. "Wake up," she whispered urgently. He stirred, his face tense even in sleep. His eyes fluttered open, and the first thing he noticed was the smell, thick and heavy, like sulfur mixed with the stench of rotting meat. It clung to the air around them, suffocating in its intensity. He gagged, looking around wildly. What, what is that smell? The chains clanked again, closer now, sending chills racing down their spines. The girl's hand throbbed painfully where the bruise marked her skin, and as she touched it, icy coldness radiated from the spot. Suddenly, from the depths of the mine, a low, guttural scream tore through the silence, a scream filled with pure malice, echoing like a chorus of agony. They both froze in terror. Emerging from the blackness ahead were figures draped in long, tattered black cloaks. They moved slowly, their footsteps dragging as chains clinked and rattled with every step. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods, but as the figures drew closer, the firelight flickered across their corpse-like features. Their skin was waxy, pale, and stretched tight over their bones, as though they had been dead for centuries. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, their breaths shallow, sending puffs of cold air from mouths that seemed sewn shut. One of the figures reached out with a skeletal hand, chains dangling from its bony wrist, its fingers brushing the girl's arm. The cold was unbearable, like death itself. The bruised handprint on her forearm burned under its touch. "Run," the man shouted, pulling her to her feet, but before they could move, the figure let out a deep, raspy breath, and more cloaked shapes emerged from the shadows, surrounding them. The air felt like ice, thick with sulfur and the sickening stench of decay. The clanking of chains filled the air as the dwellers moved closer, their black cloaks billowing as though they were made of shadow itself. The girl's vision blurred, her limbs growing heavy under the cold grip of the dwellers. She could barely make out the man's face, twisted in fear as a chain wrapped around his wrist, dragging him toward the darkness. Suddenly, she felt herself falling into the void. She gasped awake, her body jerking upright. The fire was still crackling beside her, and the man lay asleep next to her. The night was silent, save for the distant rustle of the wind outside the mine. No chains, no screams. Her heart raced as she touched her forearm. The bruise was still there, dark and unmistakable. Her fingers trembled over it, the cold still lingering in her skin. Beside her, the man stirred, his face pale and damp with sweat. He blinked, looking around in confusion. "Was it real?" he murmured, still smelling the faint, sickening odor of sulfur clinging to the air. The rotting stench seemed to linger, just enough to make his stomach turn. They sat in silence by the fire, eyes darting nervously toward the dark entrance of the mine. Neither dared to speak of the shadows they had seen, the chains they had heard, or the ice-cold touch of death still lingering on their skin. Was it all a dream, some nightmare born of the eerie atmosphere? Or had they glimpsed something far more sinister, something from hell itself, lurking deep within the abandoned mine, waiting for them to return?